So what is it that key really refers to when we're playing music? Well, in this video, we're going to explore that in terms of what we've done previously, working with the major scale, and learning how to build up chords that exist from that scale. We're going to blend that information together and finally come up with a way to think about what it means when someone finally says to you, "Hey, you, let's jam in the key of B flat." That needs to have some meaning for you, and we're going to check that out in this video coming up next. This issue is where we really begin to bring together the application of all of the detailed work that you've been doing so far, getting yourself familiar with the fretboard, getting yourself familiar with how scales are constructed, the major scale in particular, and then using that information to essentially construct chords, because chords come from scales. And what we want to do now is, unlike in issue 7, where we only built one chord, the first chord, C major, from the C major scale, we now want to go ahead and build more chords from that scale based on each of the remaining degrees of the scale, or letter names of the scale. So you already know this. I'll do this on the second string. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. You could do it on the 5th string as well, starting on this C. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. You can do this anywhere, but we need a practical range to work in so we can move up and down the fretboard easily for now. So I'm going to work it from the 5th string. And so the chords that we're going to build coming from the C major scale initially are just going to reflect the common chords that you're more than likely already very, very aware of. And that's a good starting point. And then as we knit them together, I think you'll hear some pretty cool things coming out of it. But the bigger picture here is how to respond to the question or the inquiry or the comment, "Hey, Steve, we're going to play in the key of C. What does that mean? How do you apply it onto the fretboard? What do you need to be thinking about to be able to understand that?" Keep in mind that the word key is a very sort of umbrella term. To me anyway, sorry I hit my mic. To me anyway, that's how I see it. It's an umbrella term that captures, 1, your knowledge of the scale that it's referring to, and 2, the chords that exist within that key. Those two things have to come to mind very quickly if someone says, "Hey, we're gonna do a jam session in the key of C major." Okay, so let's figure out what that means, and let's build all the tools we need to understand what the key means. And once you can get it once, the beauty of it is you get to do it, if you want, 12 other times, because we have a total of 12 major keys in our musical system. Let's get started. So of course last time we built from the 1st degree, C, we built the C major chord, and if you recall, we did that skipping every other note in the key. We went C, skip the D, E, skip the F, G. So we went C, E, G. And we found those wherever you want to find them if you know your fretboard. That's the key feature, as opposed to just going, "Oh, well, it's a C chord and I'll just make this." There's nothing wrong with that, so long as when you do make it, not only do you see it as a shape and frets and fingers, you see the notes that are making it up. Let's go and review those right now. So under my 3rd finger, this is a C on the 5th string, 3rd fret. Under my 2nd finger is an E on the 4th string, 2nd fret. 3rd string is open, that's a G. So right there, C, E, G, is a C chord, just those three strings. Then on the second string, first fret is a C under my index finger. And then finally, the open E string on the first string. So when you're actually making and playing that chord, those are the notes that make it up. C, E, G, C, E. You could even add a G under here with your pinky if you wanted to. That's a C major chord. C, E, G, C, E. What's wrong with that? Nothing. You could actually put the other G down on the sixth string and include it into this chord, which is another common way of playing the C chord. So now we have G, C, E, G, C, E. You could put both of those together. In this case, what I would have to do is mute out the fifth string with my third finger, but I could still pull it off. That's a nice sound. So you could get something going like this. Kind of idea. They're all C chords. C, E, G, C, E, G, C chord. C, C, E, G, C chord. 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 E, G, C, C chord. G, C, E, C chord. They are everywhere. So when you start to see a C chord, either in your songbook or whichever, don't just go to that by default for a while. Start to think, okay, why do I have to do that? I could do a variation of it, that's fine. Or I could maybe start to play it here. Of course, you have to introduce other approaches to strum it and control it, so it sounds good because you can't just hit 5 or 6 big strings. Okay, so we've got our first chord. It's a C major chord. The first chord built on any major scale is always a major chord using C, E, G for the time being. We can extend that out later on to C major 7, but we're going with the triad right now, 3 notes, not the 4-note version of chords. So we have a C. Second degree of the scale is a D, and we're going to go same procedure. Play the D, skip the E, play the F, skip the G, play the A. D, F, A. So let's go and use probably your familiar D minor chord and play that. Nice sound. And if you look down at that chord and you don't just see it as strings and frets and finger shapes, you've got a D on the 4th string, an A on the 3rd string, another D on the 2nd string, and an F on the 1st string. You already know when you pull out those notes from the scale, you get that type of a chord, D minor. Let's go to, and it's minor, I forgot to mention that. The second chord that comes out of a major scale, the 2nd degree chord, is always a minor chord. As to why some chords are minor and major, we have to go in a little further and understand the intervals that make up those chords, the distance from C to E and E to G or C to G. That combination creates definitions by which we create major or minor chords. So for the time being, it'll be your job to remember the order of the quality of chords that we're going to produce. So far we've got major and then minor. Let's go to E, the 3rd degree of the scale. We're going to need E, G, and B. It's an E minor chord that we are producing. Again, you have to remember that. That it's minor, by the way, not that it's E minor, because that will change depending on the key you're in. But the 3rd chord is always a minor chord. So we have E minor. And if you go in and double check what you've done, you'll see you have E's, G's, and B's. E, B, E, G, B, E. Easy. E, G, B. That's a minor chord. E minor. How about E, G, and B? There's a minor chord. E minor, I should be saying. How about E, G, B? Right there. E minor. Or this. E, G, E, G, B, using harmonics. E minor. They're everywhere. It's not just that. That's the important thing. Next chord, the one you love to hate, which is the F major chord. F major, we're going to need F, A, and C to play it. So F, A, C, and then just another F on top. And this one's a major chord. You just have to know that for now. Next chord is based on the note G. We're going to need G, B, and D. Well, if you use your the chord that you've been playing, typically, then you've got a G, a B, G and B, a D, a G, a B, and another G. Or perhaps you use the alternate version of G, including the third and pinky. No different. Students often ask me, is this still a G? Like, just because you added some extra fingers or notes or whatever. And the answer is always, well, if the notes haven't changed that make up the chord, then you still have a G, regardless of the shape. This is where shape will begin to fail you eventually, because you get so hooked on seeing it that way that you don't understand how modifying it either changes it, which it can do, or actually keeps it into the same keeps it into the same harmony, the same type of chord, a G in this case, but it looks different. We have the same cluster of notes, G, B, D, G, D, G. So it's still a G chord. The next chord is based on the A note of the scale, and it too will be a minor chord. The sixth note of the sixth degree of the scale always produces a minor chord. And we're going to need A, C, and E. Again, we're skipping every other note. Look down at the chord, evaluate that that's what you've got. Do I have A, C, and E in there? Well, here's A, 5th string, E, 4th string, A on the 3rd string, C on the 2nd, another E open on the 1st string. It's an A minor chord. No big deal. This is the same cluster of notes, same cluster of notes, same cluster of notes. So it's important, again, I keep reiterating this, use shape, but go back once in a while and keep digging in a little further to make sure, yes, I can see the notes that make it up. I'm going to refer to shape in the heat of the moment, sort of thing, but I'm aware of the notes that make it up. That's very important. Okay, A minor, one more chord to go. It's based on the note B. The name of the chord is B diminished. You probably haven't used it a lot in the music you play. It's a sound that to many people is a bit off when they first hear it. The easiest way to think about it is that it's a minor chord made a little bit more minor. That's how I think about it, and perhaps I'll explain that in another session. But I want to go over a fingering of it for you. You also have it in your PDF, of course. And make sure that you understand what it is that's making it up. So if we go through our chord construction formula again, we're going to need a B, we're going to need a D, and an F. B, D, and F, cluster those together, they make B diminished. Here's a fingering for it. There's a B on the 5th string, 2nd fret. The 2nd finger has the 4th string, 3rd fret. That's an F, one of the notes that we need. The 3rd finger has the 2nd string, 3rd fret. That's a D. That's one of the notes we need. And pinky in the 4th fret of the 3rd string has a B. So we have two B's, an F, and a D. We have all the notes of a B diminished chord, no problem. So there's a fingering for it, and you have that in your PDF. Now, what's cool to me is as you move through these chords in sequence, going from C to D minor to E minor to F, etc., I think you'll agree that you can actually hear the sound of the scale manifesting itself through those chords. And it's for that reason that we refer to what I'm about to play as something called a harmonized major scale. I'm harmonizing the notes, or another way of thinking about harmonizing is that you've made chords from those notes. I've harmonized each note of the major scale to produce a particular chord that all belong under the umbrella of the key of C major. So I know the C major scale, and I know all the chords that come out of C major built from that scale. That, in total, becomes what we refer to as the key of C. All that information clustered under that big umbrella term called the key. So here's what it sounds like when we just play the chords one after the other. C, D minor, E minor, F, G, A minor, B diminished, and back to C. And I think if you pay attention to that, again, as I mentioned, you can hear the C major scale sort of peeking itself through all of those chords. I can demonstrate this by highlighting the scale itself. Listen to this. C, C, D, E, F, G, different A minor, B diminished, and then C. You can hear it. So what you heard was you can hear that. That's really cool. That was cool to me when I first realized that the scale was kind of hinting at itself within all of these chords. So it should give you the impression that all of those chords work well together, as a general rule, to create a song that you'd like to compose perhaps, or that you will discover these chords popping up in the song you want to play. If you know that the song you want to play is in the key of C, then you shouldn't be surprised to see this cluster of chords with C being the most important one. It's probably the one you'll start with and the one you'll end with in a particular song. All of that is what we're talking about when we say, what key are we in? I hope that makes sense. Okay. Now, using those chords in those shapes as a way of exploring key and chords and how they connect up doesn't kind of really push you very far, because you already know that. Once you know something, why do you keep working on it? Mostly we do because it makes us feel good. We feel in control. It's good for our ego, but it doesn't push your growth further. What I would rather get you to do, or in addition I should say, is to play those chords up the fretboard just on a particular string set of 3 strings. So if we took the top 3 strings, E, B, and G, and built a C chord somewhere there, then we could move up those strings one step at a time through the scale and build the chord and introduce you to new ways of making the same chords you've already been making. And again, this is identified in your PDF as well. So let's take a look at this. So if I go and find a C major chord on those 3 strings, I could find a C on the 2nd string, an E on the 1st string, and a G on the 3rd string. And I could make a C major chord with 3 notes. Done. It's not easy to sit around the campfire and strum that. That's why we fill it out to this one, so you can wail away here and still create your C chord sound that you're looking for. But for our purpose, just these 3 strings. Now, this is really the coolest part for me. And I'm leaning in because I want you to really pay attention to this. The C note under my index, if you're thinking about the C major scale on the second string, it wants to go to the D note. That would be the next note in the scale. So that's fine. That makes sense. It wants to go there because what we're doing is going to build a new chord off of that D note. If we know the notes that we need ahead of time, that will help. Well, we do. We think about it for a second. I'm going to need the D note, skip the E, F, skip the G, A. So I need D, F, and A. Well, of course, you can just go and find them somewhere. But I'm going to make this a bit more systematic. The C note wants to go to D. Think of it that way. That one's done. The E note in this C chord, which is on the first string, if you're thinking of the C major scale, what's the note that comes after E? Is F. It wants to go to that note because it's just going up the C major scale as well. It just started on E. I hope that makes a bit of sense so far. So far I've got the D note that I found on the second string and the F note on the first string. The third string started with a G in the C major scale, in the C major chord, excuse me. Well, when I go to the next chord, not only does the C want to move to D and the E want to move to F, the G wants to go to A. And you put all that together and you get your very familiar D minor chord. Now you could have just looked for those notes and because you know what makes up D minor and go ahead and build them. But let's go ahead and see if we can figure out the next chord in the sequence. We already know that it's going to be E minor. We already know that we need E, G, and B. You could just go and find them. There's the E on the second string. Remember, we're moving up the fretboard here. C major to D minor. I could just take the D note and move it up to E. I could take the F and move it up to G, because that's where it wants to go within the C major scale. I hope you're with me on how I'm thinking about this. And then the A note that was in the D minor scale, it wants to move up to B. Now if I summarize all those notes, I've got E, G, and B. Well, those are the notes that make up E minor. So what's happening? Got to sit back and kind of really think about this. What's happening is on the second string, I'm simply playing the notes of C major starting on C. First three notes of the scale. On the first string, I'm still playing a C major scale. I'm just starting with an E note. E, F, G. First three notes for that guy. And I'm doing the same thing on the third string, the G string. I'm still playing a C major scale starting on G. G, A, B. And when you knit all those things together, happening all at the same time, you get these chords. That's supremely cool to me. Now again, you can just follow the notes up each string in its own C major scale thing, and you'll discover these. They'll take on different shapes, you can do that. Or you can just be good at identifying where the notes are because you know where the notes are because you've studied the fretboard a lot. So you have to make some decisions about how you want to approach this. Don't worry, again, it's all in the PDF. You can just practice it as it's laid out there in the diagram. But I want you to be able to think this through a little bit. So here's what we've got so far. C major, D minor, E minor. Well, you know the next chord coming up is F major. I can look down at the E minor chord and I can identify the E pretty quickly. It's on the second string. Boom. The fact that it's E minor, true for any of these chords by the way, the fact that it's E minor means that the E note is the root of the chord. So in the C major chord, The root was on the second string. The third of the chord, E, was on the first string. And the fifth of the chord, G, was on the third string. And that's what made the C major scale. When I created D minor, same thing is true. The root of the chord is on the second string. The third of the chord is on the first string, that's the F, and the fifth of the chord is on the third string. And it will be true for all these chords moving up the fretboard. One thing I will need to address in I think the next lesson will be that the third of D minor is not referred to as a third, it's referred to as a flat third. So we need to explore that and make sure you're clear on it for that session. In this session, you don't really need to fuss too much about it. I do explore it in the PDF a little bit. Think of it as the root of D minor is D. The third of it is some kind of an F. Or sorry, the third of it is some kind of a third. Whether it's the regular third or something referred to as a flat third. I won't get too picky about that in this session. And then the fifth of the chord is what it is. It's just the fifth. In this case, it's an A. Lots of stuff, I know. There's lots of stuff floating around here. And this is why you do have to spend some time with it. Little, tiny chunks of time done a lot. That's really the key feature. C major, D minor, E minor, F major, F on the second string, A on the first, C on the third. Kind of looks like a D shape. That's a major shape. That's a major chord, F major. If G major is the next one, you might think things like, well, if I just took that shape and moved it up 2 frets, so my third finger lands on a G, it should produce a G major chord, and you'd be right. And you didn't have to think about anything else. Just like you moved from D minor to E minor, you could think of all the individual notes that had to move, or you could just say something like, well, if that's the shape of a minor chord and D is its root, sitting here under my pinky, if I just move this whole structure up to the E note, it should become E minor. And you're right. So those are little sort of tips and tricks to help you navigate this process a little bit. F major, next chord in the sequence will be major, G major, so I just take it and move it up 2 frets and I've got G major. That's one way to do it. The other way is to say to yourself, well, the F under my third finger wants to go to G. The A under my second finger wants to go to B on that string, same string. And the C under my index wants to move up to a D note. And you move all of those notes together and you still get the same chord, G major. Or you can just go and identify them because you know your fretboard really well. You know you're just staying on these 3 strings, 1 string set. So G, B, D. You're hunting for the closest note that you need. If it's not clear to you yet, all the roots of these chords are occurring on the second string. Think about that sentence I just said and confirm for yourself that it's true. If that's a G chord, the note under my third finger, which is sitting on the second string, should be a G note. Okay. Next one is A minor. We know this. We know we need A, C, and E by how the chord is constructed. So I could go find an A, find the nearest C, happens to be on the first string, find the nearest E, happens to be on the third string, and lo and behold, because it's a minor chord, it takes on that minor shape that we've discovered earlier on in D minor and E minor. Now you could do it that way, or you could come back to the G and say to yourself, well, the G note wants to go to A. I did this a lot. This, to me, was a really good learning tool. I would put my finger down where I need the next note. The B that's under my second finger, it wants to go to C. Again, Why do I know that? Because it's coming from the C major scale, and I know the notes of the C major scale. So if I'm on B, the next note going up the fretboard will be C, and it's right next door. So I've got this and that. The note under my first finger in the G chord is a D. The D wants to go to E, but that's 2 frets up. So I've got this, this, and this. That's what I used to do. And then I would just hold that shape in my mind and then grab my left hand and go ahead and finger it, using either this or this, didn't matter. And lo and behold, I have an A minor chord made up of A, C, and E, each note moving up in its track, we can say, and we're all good. And then finally, the diminished chord, the B diminished, is the final one. It looks like, when it's done, it looks like a D chord that's been widened up, like with the jaws of life or something like that. And so, how do we get there? So the A minor chord, if we look at it note for note, the A wants to move to the B on the second string, the C wants to go to D on the first string, and the E wants to go to F on the third string. You put all that information together and you get this kind of a shape and that kind of a sound. And that name for that chord is called B diminished. Perhaps I'll explore why in another session. But there it is. And then finally, B moves to C, D goes to E, F goes to G, and we're back where we started, a whole octave higher, G, C, E, G, C, E. It's all hopefully starting to come together now. How just knowing the major scale and the notes on your fretboard have opened up completely and definitively how things work. You learn them, you think on them, you get good at thinking on them, and then in the act of playing, all that information is just sort of quietly kept in the back of your mind as you play. It's not something you have to consciously always be drawing on. It's just something that's sitting there, ready to be accessed should you need it to help you navigate your way around the fretboard. So here's what it sounds like in sequence, going up the fretboard, and it has introduced you to new ways of playing old, familiar chords. Here it is. Go back down. Now this is a little sidetrack, if that doesn't tweak your interest, realize this. I could do the exact same exercise on the next set of 3 strings, the second, third, and fourth string, and I would end up with this. C, D minor, E minor, F, G, A minor, B diminished, and C. They take on different shapes, but they're still there. I could also do the next string set using the 5th, the 4th, and 3rd strings, and I would get this. C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, B diminished, back to C. And then I could do it on the final string set of 3 strings, 6, 5, and 4. There's C major. This is a beautiful sound. C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, B diminished, C major. Amazing what you can do. Oh my gosh. All over the fretboard, just in the key of C, and all the chords that come from it, and in all different shapes and locations all over the fretboard, just like that. Now, does this happen overnight? Of course not. It takes time. Everybody complains about the lack of time that they have, so we can't fight that, but we have to develop a habit of just really starting out with one idea, how a chord is built, find it on one string set, and then work your way up according to the location of notes that make up that chord, and let the shape become a result of your thought process. It will be true that with experience and practice, you'll just see them as shapes that you're grabbing. As I play through them that quickly, I'm not thinking about the notes, but I am thinking about the relationship of the shapes as I move through them. So I've never said abandon shape. I have said it's one step in the right direction. The next step is to make sure that when you're sitting down and sort of analyzing it through a little bit, that you know what you're doing, because it's transferable to other locations on the fretboard that make the fretboard much easier to understand and makes music comprehension a lot easier to understand. So when somebody says to you, hey Steve, let's jam in the key of C, two things that you're going to want to think about when somebody says, hey Steve, let's do a jam in the key of C, or let's play this tune in the key of C. There are two things that I want your brain to be able to tell you. And the first one is, do I know the major scale of that key? Because that's going to be the centerpiece around which a lot of the material that you're going to use will be based on. For now, there's all kinds of variations of this later on down the road to embellish what you could do, but you need to start with some kind of a solid template, a good foundation. So, hey, we're jamming in the key of C. Boom, can I play a C major scale, up and down strings, across strings, however I know it, the best that I can do it. And obviously the more variety of playing it that you can do on the fretboard, the better off you are. You will feel more free in being able to play it, or jam, or whatever the case is. The second thing you want to be able to do, just like that, is, do I know the chords that are in the key of C? And you do. And the same chemistry that you went through to do this in the key of C applies to each and every major key that you can play in. And in total, we have 12 major keys in our musical system. And if that doesn't kind of ring true for you, I challenge you to count how many frets there are on your guitar before you reach the location at the double dots of your guitar. Not only is that an octave, but it's reflecting the number of keys that we have in our musical system as well. Something else for you to think about if you've never thought about it. So, keep in mind the big picture of key is an umbrella term that includes awareness of the major scale. If I'm in the key of F sharp, I need to be able to play an F sharp major scale. That's a starting point that's well worth being able to do. Either up and down the neck or across the neck, and we haven't touched going across the neck yet. Everything we've been doing is basically up and down the neck, so you can see the structure. And you need to be able to know the chords that come out of it and the order in which they occur. And this, for now, is a memorized event. The order of chords in any major key are obviously based on the major scale of that key, are always in this order: major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. For each and every key, major key that is, major, minor, minor, major, major, minor, diminished. In the key of C, C major, D minor, E minor, F major, G major, A minor, B diminished. In the key of D, or let's go to G. Key of G, G major, what comes after G is A minor, B minor, C major, D major, E minor, F sharp diminished. Why F sharp? Because if you go back to our earlier work and you built that G major scale out to make it conform to tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone, you'd find that F note has to be raised to F sharp in order to make that formula work, and that's it. And you do this for each and every major key. If you did this in the key of E, you would have E major, F sharp minor, G sharp minor, A major, B major, C sharp minor, D sharp diminished, and then you're back to E. And that's how it works. It's so ridiculously simple and systematic and structural, it's almost laughable, to be honest with you. And the reason why it appears very unrelated and disconnected is because in the world of YouTube and the world of communicating musical information through this kind of a medium, you're getting little snapshots of things that are worth exploring on the guitar, but they're not presented in a logical, linear, systematic fashion. Do this because your ability to do this will enable you to do that. And your ability to do both of those things will enable you to do the next thing, etc., all the way down the line. And so if your experience has been very piecemeal, hopefully that's why, well, not hopefully, but that's why I've put this series together to try to walk you through a bit more of a systematic approach that helps you get the big picture and how things are connected. Now look how far you've come along. You started out by just getting a sense of where the natural notes are on the 5th string way back 7 issues ago, and building that up to the major scale formula, and building that up ultimately to building chords off of the scale. And now we're in a position where we can start talking about chord progressions and how they work, and we can transition into understanding minor scales based on things that we've already done. Then from there we can go into manipulating natural minor scales into harmonic and melodic minors, but it's not piecemeal. The understanding of what you do next is strongly in place because of what you did before, and hopefully what you did before you've worked at and developed a little bit of mastery on it. Otherwise I'm just giving you information overwhelm like everybody else I'm complaining about. I don't want to do that to you, so you do need to put some work into this. Read the PDF, go through the video, make sure that you're seeing it unfold, what we're talking about, unfold on the fretboard, so that in here you feel like I'm beginning to own that knowledge. It's not just something that's been thrown at me, it's become part of me. And then when I use it to play, I feel more competent and more confident. It's as simple as that. If this video was valuable to you, and I hope it was, by all means share it around. Let your friends know about it if they're learning. This is, at any level of guitar, you can use this information because we're mostly focused on the theory side of how the guitar works, so it's applicable across the board on any style. So there you go, that's it for now. Steve Dempster finally back again after a little bit of hiatus. I'll talk to you next time. Dempster Guitar Studio. See you then. Bye.